Yardbirds had lots of different players, especially, well, mainly lead guitarists. We started with a guy called Top Topham.
Top Topham and I we wanted to form a band, and we did form a band. In fact, Jim McCarty came and joined us on drums. We still needed a singer and a bass player, I believe. We knew Keith and Paul. They were in another band, sort of an acoustic band, more acoustic blues. And we amalgamated, we joined forces, and that then became the Yardbirds.
Keith Ralph thought up the name Yardbirds. He had read a Beat Generation book, like a Jack Kerouac book, I believe, maybe On the Road, or one of those sort of books. The Yardbirds were people that used to bum lifts on trains and used to live in the rail yards. They were like hobos that lived a nomadic existence, you know, travelling around on the trains, and that was where he got it from.
We were 5 white guys in an urban, semi-suburban, urban environment. We were not black blues musicians, but that music was, you know, propelled us into creating our music. And what I got from it, and what we started to do as musicians, we had a lot of energy. That translated into the music. It became played very hard, very fast, almost pre-punk at times. And we created free-form passages within that music, which allowed guitar players or whatever to really express themselves.
They were one of the most adventurous groups of the 60s. I mean, they incorporated, you know, symphonic tempo changes, Gregorian chant, and they were probably the first group to actually encompass Indian sounds within their oeuvre. I mean, for example, there's a record called Heartful of Soul, where they actually hired a sitarist to come into the studio, but he couldn't quite get to grips with it, and Jeff Beck sort of played the sitar part and actually sounded more like the real thing than the real thing. They were certainly one of the groups that counted in the mid-60s.
In 1963, the Yardbirds took over the Railway Hotel house spot from the Rolling Stones at the Crawdaddy Club in Richmond. Typically, this legendary venue is now part of a wine bar chain. The Yardbirds are remembered for launching 3 of the greatest rock guitarists onto the world: Eric Clapton, Jeff Beck and Jimmy Page. Sometimes, and unfairly, this has the effect of understating what this band was about. The reforming of the band in 1995 was ample proof of Yardbirds' stamina and its fans.
Well, it all begins with the Yardbirds. It begins in 1964 when they were looking for a replacement for Eric Clapton, and the person with first refusal on this was Jimmy Page, but he preferred his earnings as a session musician to going on the road. But he recommended another guitarist called Jeff Beck, who was a member of a group called the Tridents.
We didn't know about Jeff Beck, but a recommendation from Jimmy was well worth having him checked out. Yes, you got lovely skin. We checked him out. In those days, you know, you kind of made instant decisions. It wasn't, you know, come for the first interview, come to the second. You know, we liked what he did. He was a very quiet guy. He spoke through his guitar. And he joined the band, and it was a very creative period with him.
And this guy with sort of long hair and greasy old trousers and big boots came along, and but he could really play, and he could play just as well as Eric.
Jeff was the Yardbirds' lead guitarist, but he was not alone for long.
He joined us on a classic night. And you've got to be careful with musicians, you know, because, you know, I mean, Keith liked to drink at that point, and of course there was plenty available. And funnily enough, Jimmy Page came to this gig, and it was the day that Paul Samwell-Smith had decided that he'd had enough of being on the road. It had all got a little bit too uncivilized for him. And Jimmy was in the audience to watch us perform with a very out of it Keith Relf, who we literally had to sort of strap to the mic. He forgot all the words and everything else. But you know, there's a side to Jimmy that's very irreverent, and he loved that, I think. And I think at that point, because Paul had left, he joined us on bass.
There's a funny story. We were on a tour when in America, and we played a gig at the Carousel Ballroom in San Francisco. It was like one of the big gigs of the time. And we got to this gig, and something was wrong with Jeff. He couldn't do the gig for some reason. And they made an announcement on the PA that the bass player was going to play lead guitar, because everybody thought, well, what's this going to be like, a bass player playing lead guitar? Of course, it was Jimmy Page playing.
I think on paper that was one of those things that you would have thought would be an absolute dream. You know, these two wonderful guitar players.
Well, there was quite a lot of competition going on between Jeff and Jimmy, and whoever, you know, Jeff or Jimmy played the first guitar solo, then the other one would want to play a better guitar solo.
The best thing that probably came out of that combination was a single called Happenings 10 Years Time Ago, which is a wonderful sort of mini pop opera within 2.5 minutes with some very explosive and creative guitar work between Jimmy and Jeff. I think on stage it may have worked once in Barnstable. I'm not sure.
The Yardbirds management changed from Giorgio Gamalski to Simon Napier-Bell to the soon-to-be infamous Peter Grant. Lucky Yardbirds.
One day Peter called us into his office and said, oh, well, now I'm your manager. He knew the business really well because he'd been a road manager. He'd worked for Gene Vincent, Eddie Cochran and people like that. And by the time we got to Zeppelin, I mean, it must have been quite a formidable duo, him and Jimmy.